You're listening to Physician Non-Clinical Careers, episode number 327. What's new in my world, and is coaching worth the expense? Sometimes I think it's best to pause, share some news, provide a little preview of what's happening, and answer a simple question. So that's what I'm doing today. By the way, did you know that you can sponsor the Physician Non-Clinical Careers podcast? As a sponsor, you'll reach thousands of physicians with each episode to sell your products and services or to build your following. The message will also appear on the website, in our newsletter, and in social media posts. So to learn more, contact us by using this email address, john.jerica.md@gmail.com, and include sponsor in the subject line. That's john.jerica.md@gmail.com if you want to become a sponsor of the podcast. Speaking of sponsors, here's a word from today's sponsor, University of Tennessee Executive MBA program. The UT Pemba is the longest running, most highly respected physician-only executive MBA in the country, and it's produced more than 700 graduates. The Haslam College of Business was recently ranked number 1 in the world by Economist Magazine as the most relevant executive MBA program. And it's a program that only takes 2 years to complete. And you'll also complete a company project while you're in the program, so you can really demonstrate the skills you're learning to your colleagues and maybe to your boss. Graduates have taken leadership positions at major healthcare organizations and have become entrepreneurs and business owners. So if you want to acquire new business and management skills and advance your non-clinical career, then contact Dr. Kate Ashley's office at 865-974-6526 or use our handy link at nonclinicalphysicians.com/physician MBA. Next thing is, I'm just about ready to open up the Non-Clinical Career Academy member club again with a special discount. I usually do that once or twice a year. I think it's almost been a year since I did that. So there's, now 27 lectures and courses in the academy. And while there is going to be probably a monthly membership way to join, most people join by just getting lifetime membership. That way you can go through whatever courses you want to go through at your own pace and without having to feel like, you've got to hurry up because these monthly membership fees are ongoing. But you'll have both choices, actually. Now, on the podcast, I've mentioned before, I am posting YouTube videos. I think I have about 20 videos up so far. I'm adding the new ones as I go. And I'm also going back and posting some of the older episodes. So that will continue to grow for some of those of you who like videos rather than, let's say, just the audio version of the presentations. And if you go to YouTube, you can use @nonclinicalphysicians and you'll find those videos right there. Look up my name, look up Non-Clinical Physicians, but really the easiest is to go to @nonclinicalphysicians, all one word. The other thing, I've been getting more interested in this whole idea of starting, managing, and eventually selling a business as an alternative for clinicians. So watch for more interviews on that topic in coming months. Let's see, I do have some other announcements really by way of promoting my colleagues who are out there helping you and helping me, really. One is that you've probably met Dr. Deborah Blaine through my podcast. She's actually been a guest 3 times. And you might ask, what is the secret to getting back on the podcast? Well, in her case, it's because she keeps writing new books. And so I don't have her scheduled to come back now, but she has written her 4th book. Now, she just started writing a little over 2 or 3 years ago. And she writes novels, so it's fiction. It's basically science fiction. Well, I have the book here somewhere, and let's see what it says. There's a lot on here, but it says once again, Dr. Deborah Blaine has captivated me with a fascinating science fiction novel. The Marakai Effect has great depth and well-built background, and I love the way everything was interconnection from the beginning to the end. Okay, that's a review. It says here that basically it's a form of science fiction, so it's a thriller, and it's a direct sequel to Beyond the Pillars of Salt, although it does stand on its own. So I've gotten through the first, I shouldn't say gotten through, I've started reading it and I've enjoyed it so far, but I just haven't finished it. So I'll put a some kind of a review on that when I do finish that. What else? Oh, if you want to get the book, you can't get it on Amazon. It'd probably be nice to go ahead and visit that website where she posts everything at allthingswriting.com. I think you can get the first chapter there just to see if you like the book. So it's allthingswriting.com. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention is my friend and colleague, Dr. Andrew Wilner, is approaching his 100th episode of his podcast. Okay, the podcast is called The Art of Medicine. It's pretty eclectic. It covers clinical topics, healthcare news, non-clinical topics. He's an expert on locum tenens, so there might be 2 or 3 episodes addressing issues related to that. Something about fixing healthcare. AI was recently covered, contracting. So again, pretty eclectic, pretty much useful to almost any physician and many other clinicians as well. And it's sometimes very entertaining or funny, or it's very serious and informative. So I would say listen to his podcast. Again, it's called The Art of Medicine, and particularly episode number 100, which will be a review of his previous podcasts. And that will be on December 10th is when it will be released of 2023. And by the way, he posts all of these on YouTube as well. So for those that prefer YouTube, you can find The Art of Medicine on YouTube. Okay, those are all the announcements and the news I have for today. Feel free to reach out to me using the email address I've mentioned before. And for the rest of today's podcast, I want to share and answer a question I recently received from a listener. Okay, so before I get into the actual topic for today, I'm going to tell you a little story, which obviously will relate to the question. So, there was a time in Russia when all religions were basically banned. Um, so, churches were closed, there were no gatherings allowed to pray, and they were being persecuted. It doesn't mean that all the activity stopped, of course, because you can't really keep people from worshiping if that's what they've been taught and what they grew up doing. So, but anyway, after a while, things did loosen up, and the brave believers could go back to church. So there was a priest in a very small town who began to spend time every day in his church, and the mayor or magistrate of that town didn't like it. So he was still against having those kinds of gatherings and allowing people to do that. So he sent a soldier to stand at the front of the church every day at the door, and to intimidate the priest when he would go over there. And if he tried to enter the church, then the soldier was to demand he answered 2 questions. So the questions were the following. Number 1 was, "Who are you?" And the other was, "Why are you here?" And so then the priest would have to take a moment and quietly and without being too aggressive answer the questions, and then the soldier would begrudgingly let him in. So this went on every day. The priest was going every day. The soldier was there every day, rain or shine, snow, whatever. And week after week and month after month, this soldier would ask, "Who are you? And why are you here?" And the priest would, adjust his answers over time as he had more time to try and come up with answers. But finally, things really loosened up, and the soldier informed the priest that that day would be his last day because he was being reassigned and being no longer a cadet at the door, a soldier at the door. So the priest looked at him and he said, "Sir, when you finish your career as a soldier, I'd like you to come back here and resume your duties, because you have no idea how much you've helped me by forcing me to answer those 2 questions each day for myself. who am I and why am I here? So I like that story. And honestly, I heard that story from a bishop who was residing over Catholic Mass in Lourdes, France. So you can imagine that the setting was kind of interesting. And I won't go into too much, but when I heard, I had never heard that story before, and so it has kind of stuck with me. But it relates to coaches because for some coaching, that's kind of the crux of their coaching is, you know, why am I here? Who am I? What do I stand for? Who am I? Why am I here? What are my goals? What are my plans? Do I, things like that. So the question that I was asked earlier this week was um, pretty straightforward, and I'm going to change it a little bit only because it was a particular person. I don't necessarily want to overstep my bounds in terms of privacy and that, but it was a pretty straightforward question. He basically described what he wanted, what his situation was, why he was looking to find a new career. And he had contacted several coaches with the information and had told them what he wanted, what he needed. And one of the coaches said, well, she was going to provide 3 hours of coaching, split up 3 separate hours. And it was going to address the three issues that he really had asked her to address. And she was going to charge somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 to do that. And so the follower or the listener from the podcast that emailed me said that he just wondered, to him, that sounded kind of steep, quote unquote, like it sounded kind of expensive. And particularly since it was going to be, limited to 3 hours. Maybe he did the math, I don't know, but he just was maybe expecting a lower number. So I provided my answer. And what I'm going to do now is sort of do an extended version of the answer that I provided to him. So thinking about my answer to this and this issue brings up another story, actually. We can call it a parable, but I don't know. I think this one is actually real. But there was a factory, actually a publisher owned a multi-million-dollar offset press, that it used to print weekly tabloids. And one day the press came to like a screeching halt. It just died. It made a really loud noise, stopped running, and that was it. And, the people working at the print shop that were working on this massive press tried everything they knew to get it running again. So the operators, the maintenance staff, they even had mechanical engineers at the plant, and they were unable to get that machine to run again. So they were out of business temporarily until they either replaced the machine or got it fixed. So the operations VP called around to all of her colleagues to try to identify someone who might know how to solve this problem, recounting everything that they had tried so far. And there was one name that came up several times during those calls. So the VP reached out and contacted this consultant, made arrangements to come by the next day. Now, I said the word consultant, and when I'm talking about consultants and coaches, there's a lot of overlap. So sometimes I'll use those terms interchangeably because when we're talking about like career coaching, a lot of that is consulting too, because you're not just doing like the generic things that a coach would do, which are very similar to what a therapist would do, but you get into a lot of specifics when you're doing career coaching as to how to apply, where to apply, and that kind of thing. So this consultant spoke to everybody who ran the press, everybody who tried to repair it. He looked at the machine for about 30 minutes, made a few adjustments, and he was able to get that press running a few minutes after doing all of that. So the thing was, the VP was pretty upset when the consultant handed her a bill for $15,000 for repairing the machine. And she asked him how he could justify $15,000 for about 1 hour's worth of work. And what the consultant told him was, look, you didn't hire me as an hourly employee, telling me what to do. You needed my expertise. No one else could have solved this problem. I spent the last 30 years acquiring unique experience and knowledge to be able to fix this particular problem. And so that wasn't what the $15,000 for, was his time there, his ability to, remove a piece of the equipment or whatever. It was knowing what to do, having seen that kind of problem before, reaching into their, mental toolbox and figuring out, okay, this is what's going to solve this problem. And I'm sure the other part of the argument was, look, if I hadn't come today and solved this problem, you would probably at best be able to get the manufacturer to come out here in 2 or 3 days and maybe solve the problem within the next few days or even a week. And by that time, you would be way beyond $15,000 worth of lost revenue, not to mention a lot of unhappy customers. So I use that again as an example of what we're talking about in coaching and consulting. So you kind of have to change the way you look at this. First of all, what I know is that the most experienced and effective coaches will probably charge the most for their time. And if you're thinking about it, let's say you're applying for a job as a physician or a clinician, let's say an APN, PA, or whatever, pharmacist, you're going to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. If you're a physician, it could be $300,000-$400,000 a year, and whatever job you're going into, whether it's clinical or non-clinical. And to expect to hire an effective coach for $100 an hour or $200 an hour for you to land a job that's going to solve a lot of your problems, make you happier, make you less stressed, uses your skills. There's a lot that goes into that. So you should expect, to be paying, that person just doing the job you would be applying for can make $200 or $300 an hour. So why would they devote time and sharing their expertise with someone, for less than that at least? And the thing is, if you need specific information, this is where I'm talking about the expertise of a really focused consultant or coach. Let's say you want to get a particular job in a particular industry that's going to pay very well. And that means the coach has probably had that job or has hired someone to that job, knows the job description, knows what the must-haves and the nice-to-have skills or experiences needed to land that job would be. Then it's going to be worth, a multiple of that $200 to $300 an hour. And again, and if you're talking about just general life coaching, it's going to be on the lower end because there's just general principles that can be applied. But if you also want to get in, like, I need specifics of how to write my resume, how to send out a cover letter, where do I apply, what's the quickest, there's some things that you have no idea. For example, for some jobs in pharma, let's say, you really should apply to a CRO rather to a pharmaceutical company. And a good coach that's, let's say, addressing pharmaceutical jobs in the pharmaceutical industry will have that kind of knowledge. Someone in hospital health systems, they're going to have specific knowledge as to what the CFO, the CEO, and the CMO are looking for in hiring a medical director or even a VP for somebody in that facility. Another way to look at it is to consider, what is your goal when you're thinking about engaging a coach? And maybe this will help kind of make it even more clear. Is it a simple task or a complex task? So that's a big differential. So if we're talking about, okay, I want to learn how to plant a tree, I want to learn how to fix a tech problem, or let's say repair my bicycle. Well, to learn that, to get coaching for that, it's pretty simple. You can go online, you can Google it, you can go on YouTube, and within 5 minutes, they'll walk you through a process. You can answer those questions. But if we think about some other more complex sorts of goals, like landing a new job, starting a successful business, I can imagine even winning your first election. I've never tried that, but I'm assuming that there are experts and coaches and consultants that help you do that, and they're not going to be cheap. Or even, this is a good one that I talked to a podcast guest about, and that was admission, gaining admission to a top tier medical school. Now, there are dozens and dozens of things that you should do. Now, we think we know how we're going to do that. Obviously, get the best grades we can and, write a good letter of introduction and do the application properly. But there are people that are paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars per hour because they're thinking, okay, I want to get into this residency in this specialty. Let's say, you name it, whatever, gastroenterology or otolaryngology, and I have my eye on 2 or 3 fellowships and 2 or 3 residency programs and maybe a really top tier medical school for whatever reason. That's not how I did it. I just wanted to get into med school so I could be a doctor. But there are coaches who specialize in starting with the undergrads, how to get in the best med school, the best residency, the best fellowship. They're paid hundreds and thousands of dollars to teach them how to do that because there's only a few people that have done it. And besides just being an excellent student and having good work ethic, there are a lot of little tips and tricks that if you don't know them, you're never going to get into Harvard. So as we get into these more complex and maybe even time-wise more longitudinal, the cost is going to go up because the number of people with the expertise is going down. Now, there are caveats because just because someone says they can do this shouldn't be you're going to plunk down $5,000, $10,000, whatever, and believe that they can do it. So there are caveats. And so a couple of them are, one is, what is the deliverable that you want to get from this coaching? Is it just you need an accountability partner, who can do basic coaching once a month, once every 2 weeks to accelerate your progress? Pretty much any good coach, general life coach or business coach can do that, can maybe take you from something you would have done on your own in a year and get it down to 6 months, or 2 years down to 9 months, something like that. And that doesn't require necessarily specific special expertise. But if you're looking more towards a deliverable that is an outcome, that's like in the hospital setting when, we were talking about quality improvement and patient safety. You've got some outcomes that are, they're not really outcomes, they're processes. So I put in place a good quality improvement process. So that means I have good quality, right? No, that doesn't ensure that at all. It just means you have a process which may or may not be delivered appropriately and effectively. The real proof is the outcomes, the patient care outcomes. That's the end point. So it's not always easy to get a coach to commit to an endpoint because so much of what you accomplish when you're being coached is the commitment that you have and the time and the coachability that you have. I like to think of myself as coachable, but it's hard when you have a strong personality. If you might be, a little OCD like me or whatever it might be, you might always think that you know how to do things. And so if you're going to get a coach, you want to be coachable, particularly if you're trying to get an outcome, because most of the time the coach won't take you unless you agree to follow what they do. Otherwise, they can't guarantee the outcome. So I remember this kind of applied to like when I was working as a CMO of a hospital. When we had a consultant come in, we always wanted to know what the outcome was. In other words, we didn't want someone to come in and say, look, I am going to do some lectures and I'm going to teach your staff all about how to be doing utilization management and reduce your denials. And so you're going to pay me, $1,000 for every lecture. I'm going to do 10 lectures. I get $10,000. And that's how I'm going to address your utilization management and length of stay program. As opposed to someone who said, no, we're going to come in, we're going to have a team, and we're going to start by educating everybody. And then once you implement these new things that we're teaching you, we're going to be there side by side watching and coaching your staff how to respond to questions, how to talk to patients, how to talk to physicians, what kind of checklist to use, and really get down into the nitty gritty. And we will guarantee that your uncollectible revenue because of denials or other metrics that represent that, we'll guarantee at least a 20% improvement in that. And generally, we shoot for a 50% improvement. So now you're talking about outcomes. So you kind of have to get to that point if you want to really make sure that an expensive coach is worth it. So if you're saying, well, I want to find a part-time remote job in either utilization management or clinical documentation improvement, and then you try and pin down the coach. Okay, so you're going to teach me specific ways to accomplish this. And in your estimation, I should be able to land that new job within what period of time? So you might not get an actual guarantee, but you might get something like, well, if you follow everything that we tell you and, come to your meetings and don't blow us off and, pay us on time, then yes, we will, let's put it this way, we'll refund part of your money if that doesn't happen. So that's almost like a guarantee. So, the way to do that, two things. One is you definitely have to interview your coach. And most coaches have a so-called discovery call, which actually has value because they will give you advice right on that discovery call. But the main purpose of the discovery call really is to have a 30-minute conversation, let's say, with the coach and just hear their voice, tell them to explain why they think they can help you, what would be entailed. Do they have a certain way to approach this problem? And, really, if at all possible, get some testimonials for sure, although those are usually provided directly by the coach or consultant. But getting references, if you could talk to 2 or 3 people that can, concretely answer your question, like how long were you using this coach? How often did you meet? What were your sessions like? And was there other supporting material? Did they have like intellectual property they were sharing with you, like checklists and resource lists and things that they only share with their coachees? And did they live up to their promise? And did you get the job that you thought you were going to get at the end of that coaching? Sometimes there's coaches that won't do that, but I mean, really, a few $1,000s for a few hours with a career coach for a physician is quite reasonable. I know though there are others that go as high as $5,000 or $10,000 over. We're talking a year or so because career transition, it can take a long time. And if you think about it, I mean, there are people that spend tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in, let's say, a monthly meeting with Tony Robbins or some really high powered, motivational, expert or what have you. So, the bottom line on the answer to the question that I had earlier this week from that physician was, look, something between $2,000 and $3,000. If you can make it crystal clear what you're looking for, and your expectation is that you should be able to be in a position to really identify the job and apply for the job by the end of your coaching. And if the coach will, agree to that, not guaranteeing that you get the job, but really sharing all that knowledge, information, and advice, and even encouragement, then I would say definitely. I've paid 2 people in the past for a year's worth of coaching, which is basically monthly meetings, for $8,000 for each, for 2 totally different reasons. So I'm a believer, and I think it was worth it. And just like I think it's worth it to pay my fitness coach and work out with him 2 times a week. And when you add up all the payments that I've done every week for the last few years, it's added up to more than a few $1,000s, and I'm in a lot better health. It's helpful. To access the show notes and the links to resources related to today's content, go to nonclinicalphysicians.com/what's new. That's what's, the word what's dash new. Hopefully that apostrophe works okay. We'll see. Anyway, nonclinicalphysicians.com/what's new. If this is just being posted, it will, of course, be at the top of my list of podcasts and YouTube videos. Remember that this podcast is made possible by the support of the University of Tennessee Physician Executive MBA program. You can learn more about that at nonclinicalphysicians.com/physician MBA. Some of the links that I refer you to that you'll find in the show notes are affiliate links That means I receive a payment from the seller if you purchase the affiliate item using my link. I'll remind you that today's opinions are simply mine, and while the information provided in the podcast is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge, there are no guarantees that using the methods discussed will lead to success in your career, life, or business. So always consult the appropriate consultant, attorney, accountant, career strategist before making any major decision about your career. So I'll hope to see you all here next Tuesday for another episode of Physician Non-Clinical Careers. All right, bye now.